All right, today we will be talking about Chapter 4, which covers the tissues that will be found in the body. So there's four major tissue types: epithelial, connective, muscle, and nervous tissue. Epithelial is going to form sheets that cover or line the body. Connective tissues provide structural and functional support. Muscle produces movement, and then nervous tissue is responsible for sensing, conducting, and processing information. Within these tissues is a matrix, which is a jelly-like material made up mostly of water with various interlocking fibers. It's also known as the extracellular matrix, or the ECM. This refers to the amount and kind of fluid material between the cells. So the materials between the cells can vary. Some of the more common materials that you'll see is collagen and elastin. So collagen is going to provide a flexible strength, while elastin allows our tissues to stretch and then kind of recoil or go back to their original shape and size. Depending upon the tissue, the amount and composition of the matrix will vary as well. For example, the blood matrix contains no fibers, so it's allowed to flow freely, which is what we want, with the blood flowing through our blood vessels. Whereas the bone matrix, the fibers are encrusted with a mineral crystal that provides density and strength. So we'll start with our first group of tissues, which is our epithelial tissue. This covers the body and many of its parts. This is one of the more abundant tissue types that we have. It is classified in two different ways, according to shape and then by cell arrangement as well. So shape is squamous, cuboidal, columnar, or transitional. So our squamous is going to be flat and scale-like. Cuboidal is more in that cube or rectangle shape, or excuse me, a cube or a square shape, where the columnar is going to be that rectangular shape. And then transitional is kind of a little different from all the others. It has varying shapes throughout that allow it to stretch and then recoil back to its smaller size. If we are categorizing this tissue by cell arrangement, we're going to classify it as simple or stratified. So simple means that we have these cells arranged in a single layer, and then stratified, there are many layers to the cells. So we'll take a look at some pictures here. Right here you can see, Right here you can see the cell shapes. So there's squamous, cuboidal, or columnar. So again, that squamous is a flattened out kind of sac shape. Cuboidal is a square or a cube, and then columnar is that rectangular. If we look to the picture kind of on the right over here, we also see that we have simple and then stratified. So simple is just that one layer. You can see here there's just one layer of those squamous cells, where on this side there's multiple layers throughout. What you'll see with the transitional, if you look on this one here, when it's relaxed, it sits up nice and tall. Then as it stretches, those cells kind of flatten out on top of each other, allowing that organ or that tissue to really stretch out. A good example of this is our urinary bladder. So when it's empty, the bladder is a smaller structure, and then as it fills with urine, as we produce that urine, the bladder will continue to expand until we urinate, and then it shrinks back down to that original size. These are just some slides showing the microscopic structures of those cells. So this contains simple squamous and simple cuboidal cells. If we're looking here, this would be the squamous, this would be the cuboidal. This diagram shows our stratified squamous. So again, with that stratified, there's multiple rows of those cells. Here is a simple columnar tissue. So simple meaning that there's just that one layer. Sometimes with the columnar, it's a little difficult to tell because they do stretch so high up there, but it is just that one layer of cells. What you'll notice sprinkled out in here are these little structures here. Sorry, that circle's a little large. Mostly focus on that structure. What those are is goblet cells, and those are responsible for the production of mucus. So we would find those in any lumen or area that's going to produce that mucus. So small intestine, in the respiratory tract, those areas will contain the goblet cells. This one here is a little tricky. So the question is it simple or stratified? It's actually a pseudo-stratified. So it really is considered a simple, if we're looking at it that way, it would be a simple layer of cells. What happens is the nucleus of these cells are located in different areas, and the cells themselves are kind of in this weird shape. So that gives the illusion of being a stratified layer of tissue. You'll commonly see this with columnar cells. That, again, that rectangular shape can kind of throw things off. This just shows us our transitional epithelium. Again, areas of the body that are subjected to stress and must be able to stretch. So next we have our connective tissue. This one is technically the most abundant, widely distributed tissue in the body. That's because there's a lot of different types of tissue that fall into connective tissue. As we go through these, you'll see that really every area of the body is going to contain some type of connective tissue. So in the intercellular matrix of the connective tissue, there's actually relatively few cells. So we'll go through some of the types. Areolar, that's going to be your loose connective tissue. This is found in areas between tissues and organs. So we'll talk about that a little bit later in chapter 6, but that area is called the fascia. The adipose, this is going to be your fatty tissue. This plays a role in protection, insulation, support, and nutrient reserves. Reticular tissue is found in the bone marrow and the spleen. Mostly blood production is the function of that tissue type. Dense fibrous tissue, this is going to be your tendons and your ligaments. And these have a dense arrangement of collagen fiber. So if we think back to collagen, we remember that it has that flexible strength, which is a good component to have around those bones that the tendons and ligaments are going to be surrounding. Bone tissue is actually considered a connective tissue as well. This is a hard calcified matrix that you'll find in bone tissue. And then cartilage tissue contains a hard but flexible matrix composed of chondrocytes. Remember that chondrocytes go with our cartilage. Those are the cells found in the cartilage. We mostly find cartilage between bones that articulate. So anytime there's movement between bones, you'll see a layer of cartilage so that those bones don't rub on each other and wear down prematurely. And then we have our blood tissue. So erythrocytes or leukocytes, those would be our red blood cells and white blood cells respectively. Muscle tissue, main function is going to be movement, of course. There's 3 different types of muscle tissue: skeletal, cardiac, and smooth. So skeletal muscle will always attach to a bone. Those are the muscles that we're most familiar with for the most part. Another name for skeletal muscle is going to be striated voluntary muscle. So striated refers to the microscopic view of a muscle or of the skeletal muscle, and then voluntary, that component comes from the fact that we can control our skeletal muscles. We can think, oh, I need to move my arm, and then we know that we need to engage the biceps, and we're going to be able to move that muscle, move the arm. Cardiac tissue is found in the heart walls. This is known as striated involuntary. So again, in that microscopic analysis, you'll see these striations, and I have a couple pictures to show you on the next slides. But involuntary is because we don't have any control over it. We can't think, I need to beat my heart right now, and then our heart will beat on command. It just kind of does its own thing. It's an involuntary control. And then smooth muscle is going to be any tube-shaped organ. So blood vessels, small intestine, large intestine, those would all be smooth muscle tissue. These are also known as non-striated involuntary muscles. So when we look at our microscopic analysis, there's no striations found in the muscles, and again, we don't have any control over their movement. So here's skeletal. You can see those striations throughout. Again, this is voluntary. We are in control of when it contracts and when it releases. Here's cardiac. You'll see that it looks pretty similar with those striations, but keep in mind this is involuntary. We cannot decide when our heart contracts and when it relaxes. And then smooth, you'll notice that there's no striations here. So in those other muscle types, we saw these striations running lengthwise like this. With smooth muscle, there's 0 striations. So easy way to remember that one. And then again, we don't have any control over the contraction of these muscles. Our last tissue type is going to be nervous tissue. So main function is to provide communication between body structures and control of body functions. Within this tissue type, there's 2 different cells. So we have our nerve cells, which are also known as our neurons. And then we have special connecting and supporting cells, which are glia or neuroglia. So the neuron itself is going to be made up of a cell body, 1 axon, and then 1 or more dendrite. So the axon is going to be the portion of the cell that transmits impulses away from the cell. Dendrites are going to carry the impulses to the cell. So those give our nervous tissue or nervous cells almost a star-like appearance. This one in particular, you can really see where that kind of star shape is formed. So that's just from the axon and then the dendrite that are coming off of that cell. And that is all of the tissues in the human body. If you guys have any questions, just email me or give me a call.